Hello and welcome to the Hangout. Europe's elections are 4 months away today, starting on May the 22nd. In political campaign terms, that's just around the corner. And for today's debate on the elections, we're kicking off with Ireland, a country you'll remember which exited from the €85 billion EU-IMF bailout just at the end of last year. A shining example, according to many of Ireland's EU colleagues, of how to get back on your feet in the middle of an economic crisis. But what's been the price for ordinary people, the people with the vote, and how will that play out come polling day? Steering us through these and many more questions are two MEPs from opposite ends of the spectrum, both standing for re-election. Mairead McGuinness from the European People's Party, a very warm welcome, and from the governing Fine Gael party in Ireland, and Emer Costello from the Socialists and Democrats here in Brussels, and in Ireland the Labour Party, which is part of the coalition. We have live on the line 4 contributors: Jack O'Connor, president of the SIPTU trade union in Ireland; Gavin Duffy, an entrepreneur and small businessman from the once booming high-tech west of Ireland; David Gibney, another trade unionist from the Mandate Union and a member of the We Are Not Leaving campaign of people against emigration of Ireland's young talent; and lastly, but by no means least, from France, just to give this some extra European breadth, Ramesh Gossi from MEDEF, the French Employers Association. Don't forget you can join the debate via the hashtag #EPHangout on Parliament's Google Plus page or on its Facebook and Twitter pages. Right, introductions over. Let's start with our panel here. And let's start, Mairead, with you first. Set all of this in context, if you could, for us. What's at stake in these upcoming European elections? Because everybody says elections are crucial, and these are more crucial than ever.
I mean, elections are really important, but I think what struck me listening to your introduction was it's 4 months away, so it's around the corner, as you rightly said. And I suppose because Europe has come through a trauma, a body blow of a crisis, and we're beginning to see an element of stability, which I really welcome, an element of some restoration of calm, that these elections need to point the way forward for better times ahead, because, as you said, people have suffered hugely, not as a result so much of the economic crisis, but as a result of the unsustainable growth patterns in Ireland, for example, and in other places. And then we had the crash. We had a banking crisis, and as you rightly say, Ireland has emerged from the bailout, and there are some positive signs of restoration of confidence in Ireland. So I think these elections have to play into that, but also give people hope for the future.
Costello, from your perspective, what's at stake in these elections?
Well, these elections are going to be very important for the future direction that Europe takes. The crisis has really left people in some ways feeling very, very hurt, very despondent, and I think that to a certain extent too they started to lose faith in European institutions. And I think that what we have to do in this election is that we have to say that there is a way forward, that we can plot a way forward, that we can offer people hope for a better future, for growth and for jobs.
The point you say about institutions failing people is very true, in the sense that people believed that institutions would react quicker and better. The failure was that institutions didn't listen before we hit the wall. I think had we been more attentive to what commentary was out there in terms of a potential crisis, things would not have gotten as bad.
Let's test those ideas out with our guests. Jack O'Connor, you're with us, I think, from Dublin. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. I'm just wondering how much of that you buy into, and what points and questions would you like to put to both MEPs?
There is a widespread perception that the one-sided austerity agenda, which has been driven by those at the top of the European institutions, is responsible for compounding the problem. And people want to know of the political parties who are contesting this election as to what steps are going to be taken to revitalise the economy of Europe and to provide jobs.
OK, let's put those questions then. The specific pathway to job creation and reducing unemployment levels.
Good morning, Jack. Just to say, we didn't hear exactly your entirety of your question, but I'll pick up the points that you raised. And the question of betrayal and concern. We all know this. We deal with people on the ground. And what we're doing, if you listen to Michael Noonan, the Irish Finance Minister, on Saturday, when he spoke about the reaction to the sequence of events that have occurred in Ireland, the Moody's regrading, the exit from the bailout, people wanting to to invest in Ireland, people wanting to create jobs in Ireland. Politicians don't create jobs, but they create the climate in which people who can invest and want to invest will do it. And we are beginning to see that in Ireland. And you do that by taking a step-by-step approach to recovery. And Minister Noonan, I think, has delivered on it. Now, there is unfinished business, and you rightly say the issue of the legacy debt is not finished, but it's not off the table.
Put the question to Emer Costello first. Just 1 second, Mairead. And your solutions for the unemployment.
One of the issues that we have been trying to address through the issue of youth unemployment, and particularly an initiative of the Parliament, was the idea of the youth guarantee. And we did manage to secure significant funding for a youth guarantee, €6 billion to be front-loaded over the next 2 years initially. And that is something that I think is hugely important, and it shows the role of the European Parliament. Similarly too, when you ask about the recapitalisation of the Irish banks, and particularly that Europe would honour the commitment that was made on the 27th of June 2012 in relation to breaking the link between the sovereign and banking debt. And we in the European Parliament are currently carrying out an investigation into the impact of the Troika in each of the programme countries.
I want to go to Gavin Duffy, who's a businessman based in West Galway, just set up his own small enterprise and is an employer, a small employer. Gavin, what's your take on this, and what would you like to put to the MEPs?
I guess since the crisis, we've seen the flaws exposed in the entire European project. For example, can we have a single European policy for such a diverse European system? And I guess how that has trickled down for a small enterprise like ourselves is the complete collapse of the credit system in the banking sector.
Sorry to interrupt you there, Gavin, but I want to put that question because you've honed in on the banking system in Ireland, which many say is the source of the problem in that country. Let me ask you first of all, Emer Costello, what's your response to that, to the question of recapitalisation, the possible question of mutualisation of debt? How do you stand on that?
Well, I think that is going to be one of the really important issues, and I think, as Paul has said, that Europe is much more on people's consciousness, and indeed economics, and everybody has a huge awareness now of issues that and economic terms that they weren't so familiar with maybe a few years ago. The issue of recapitalisation of the banks is going to be one of the primary issues, access to credit, and again...
And does that spill into the next electoral phase after the elections in May?
Oh, I think it's going to be a hugely important issue going forward for the European Union, and I think that it is an issue that we really do have to address, how the banks are operating and how we hold the banks to account. And if you look at it as well, and I think that this is the whole issue around banking union, and the European Parliament is trying to, at the moment, to negotiate with Council. Sometimes it's not easy, but we are determined that when we do bring in the banking union, that we need to get it right. We've started in relation to the single supervisory mechanism, and there is agreement on that. We're moving towards looking at the resolution of banks and how banks can be wound up, or how banks operate in those circumstances. And then finally we're looking at some kind of deposit retention policy for people. But I think in general what we need to put together is a banking union that will give us a banking system that is fit for purpose, and that will encourage people to lend to businesses and to ordinary people.
Okay,
but
let me put that to you, Mairead.
Gavin, who's gone off the screen here, but good morning to you, is one of the key people on this programme, because he's actually in business, creating jobs. And the most important point he made, and it's echoed in small businesses in Ireland and across Europe, the choking off of credit to business and agriculture and sectors that can actually provide jobs is having a really negative consequence. Now, we've put in place in Ireland a lot of systems to try and see if it's being done unfairly, and that's working to some extent. But it is a problem, and I think it's a problem in other member states as well. It's a particular difficulty in Ireland.
Good. Let's turn now to another of our guests, another trade unionist, David Gibney, who's also part of a campaign called We Are Not Leaving, to try and prevent the emigration of young Irish talent from Ireland to Britain, to America, to Australia, anywhere but Ireland, to try and find work. David, are you there on the line? Can you hear me okay?
I am, yes.
Jolly good. What's your point?
Ireland has been absolutely devastated, all communities throughout our country, by emigration. We're losing about 9 people every hour to emigration. We've lost about 250,000 young people over the last 4 years to emigration. This campaign, We're Not Leaving, is sort of tying all the pieces together about the effect emigration is having, why football clubs are closing down, why mental health is a massive issue among young people in Ireland, because they've lost a lot of their social circles.
David, how do you summarise all that in a single point or single question that you'd like to put to the MEPs?
Well, Jack has sort of touched on some of the question I was going to ask, which was about the sharing of the debt across Europe. I mean, the average cost to this EU citizen for the European banking crisis, and we must remember it is a European banking crisis, it's not an Irish banking crisis. The average cost to the EU citizen is €192. The average cost to an Irish citizen is €9,000. So we need to look at that and look at the debt. And I wanted to ask the two members of the European Parliament there how they would go about impacting upon that debt, how they would address that in the European Parliament. Our government has actually said that they haven't sought a write-down in debt. I want to know what they will do in Europe to seek some sort of consolidation of the debt or some sort of sharing.
Fine, thank you very much indeed. David, let's go to you first, Mairead, on that.
In terms of the legacy debt, which is the big issue that Jack and David has raised, Minister Noonan is working with his finance ministers and heads of state and MEPs to deal with this issue. I think the dilemma, and it's a difficulty we'll have explaining to people, that you just don't come in, bang the table and get the result. In this place, and there's a lot of buzz going on around us, you work with people. It takes time and effort, and sometimes you lose patience with it. But that's the worst thing you could do. I'm a great believer that we in Ireland have had successes in Europe on the promissory note and on other things because we were persistent and diligent to the cause. And I believe we will get a solution to this. I think for business people like Gavin, what they want is immediate action on the ground to allow them get on with investing and to create jobs for people who do not want to leave Ireland. Because every one of our families, and I'm sure Emer's the same, we've all been affected by the scourge of emigration of people who didn't want to leave, which is different than those who might have chosen to leave.
Let's put it to the points that Dave Gibney makes to you now.
Yeah, well, first of all, good morning, David. And I just might say at the outset too that one of my primary motivations for getting involved in the Labour Party was because during the 1980s, when all of my friends had left Ireland, I had spent a year abroad, came home and said, I don't want to go. If I go again, I go for good. I don't want to do that. I went to see a forced placement officer and he told me that there was no future for me in this country and that I should leave. I should take the boat and go to England and do everybody a favour. At that time, we had a Minister for Finance who said that the island wasn't big enough for all of the young people, and there were people advocating schemes to give people money to leave. And I, like you said, I'm not leaving, and I stayed and I got involved in the Labour Party. So that in a sense is my story, but I think that it's the story now that is facing so many people and so many young people. And I would agree with you about what you say, is that it is important that we actually find a way to create jobs to enable those young people to stay.
Concrete steps within your remit as a European politician?
As a European politician, I think that one of the areas where we have played a role is, first of all, say, in tackling the issue of youth unemployment by looking at programmes such as the Youth Guarantee, and by the European Parliament insisting that the money was front-loaded over 2 years and that there was additional funding put in place. Similarly, I think that what we did with the European budget, because we were faced with very difficult decisions in negotiating that, but I think that the MEPs did a good job in negotiating the European budget, in the sense that they really tried to make sure that it's almost €1 trillion, the EU budget. And what we did was that we tried to make sure that the tools were in place, that it would allow, there would be a certain amount of flexibility in the budget so that we could do more with less, and that we could really use the European budget as a tool for investment and get that budget and get that investment out to the various different communities that are suffering and that are hurting.
Okay, let's just take a slight pause now before we come back to you and cut to my colleague Lavinia to find out what ordinary people in Ireland are making either of this debate or the kind of questions they want to put beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Paul. Gareth in one article says the Irish seem to be among the happiest people on this troubled earth. They should do a survey of comparative level of job satisfaction among democratically elected politicians.
We'll put that question later on, the happiest people on earth.
And on Twitter, Ellen says, after 5 years of belt tightening, the people are realizing that their assets are being grabbed simply to pay for the mistakes of the financial sector. And in a comment, Charlie says, banks behave as if their only stakeholders are stakeholders and bondholders, when their fundamental stakeholder is the average taxpayer. Our interests should be looked after first and foremost by the regulator.
Okay, there's plenty of food for thought there.
Look, you couldn't disagree with that last point. I mean, the banks have to refocus on service to their customers.
But how do you do that? How do you do that within an austerity economy?
No, it's nothing to do with austerity. These banks have come from a position where they were lashing money out willy-nilly. They grew almost fat on the gorging of this. There's a collapse, and they have, as is rightly pointed out, ordinary people are suffering. The change of culture has to come from within, and banks are a little bit contrite, not sufficiently, and we have to push that. It's a national issue and a European issue.
I think that when you, the banks have to hold their hands up and take a large part of the responsibility for the crisis that we face, that we're facing, and it runs from the top down. Like, it goes from the attitude of the European Central Bank, and then permeates down through into international banking systems. The Irish government made it, and it was clear to the Irish government back in 2010 and 2011 that the banking crisis was of such gravity and such enormity that it was really going to make no difference if we didn't pay back the senior bondholders. It couldn't really do any further damage to the Irish banking system. But the European Central Bank under Jean-Claude Trichet came in and said absolutely not, and he's alleged to have said that if you try to burn senior bondholders, that what will happen is that a bomb will go off, and it won't be in Dublin, it won't be in Frankfurt, it will be in Dublin. But what we would say, and particularly in the S&D group, what we would say is that Ireland has been held responsible and accountable for that, but we would say that to a large extent that it was the European banks, and from that point of view I agree with David, it's a European banking crisis.
I just want to go to our final guest, who's Ramesh Ghosi in Paris. We've been talking a lot about the distinction between an Irish banking crisis and a European banking crisis. What are your observations, Ramesh, so far, listening to this debate, and what point would you like to put to both MEPs?
From France, I have to say that we receive good signal that Ireland is slowly but surely recovering, and it's very encouraging. I just wanted to first start with this because we know it's very tough for the people, but there is some good signal. My point is that it's difficult in France. It might be difficult in Ireland, but you know, I feel that Ireland has created some condition to help, you know, young enterprise to go faster. If you look at the tax level, if you look at the employee payroll charges and so on, sorry for this, we see that Ireland has taken good measures, but there's probably good effort to attract new technologies, because today Ireland is playing with the big fish, the big name Google, Intel, but to create jobs we need new potential for Ireland, like in France with robotics and partnering robotics. But my point and my questions to the people here at the table would be, do you have a clear roadmap of the technology or company you want to attract in Ireland to create new jobs and, create a new future for the young people?
That's a very good question. Mairead, if you turn to that one first, but also address one other question that Ramesh was raising about the status of Ireland as a sort of tax haven for big global business.
Ireland is not a tax haven, and that's been proven. It is not a tax haven. There is an issue for the world to deal with companies that try and avoid paying proper tax. But to describe Ireland as a tax haven is incorrect. There are measures happening at a global level, and I think they will have an effect, because it is not acceptable acceptable that big companies can move money between one place and the other and pay no tax at all. I was happy that at least there was a recognition just on this programme that others see Ireland as having made progress. And that is really important, because in all of life, confidence matters. It matters to people in their daily, when they wake up in the morning, this happiness issue. It matters that people see a future. And I'm glad that this is being seen. We are playing with the big fish, if you like, in terms of inwards investment. But don't forget that most people in Europe work in small and medium enterprises. It's the same in France. It's the same in Ireland. I look at the agriculture food sector. We're seeing an increase in jobs in that sector, which in the past was regarded as an ancient and a historic enterprise. We're now realising it's fundamental to our recovery, not just in Ireland, but across Europe.
Okay, let's go to you, Emer. Specifically, Ramesh's question about a roadmap for bringing down youth unemployment and creating youth employment.
Well, I think that has to be the focus of both at both national and at European level, and I do believe that there is a way where we can create good work, where we can create decent jobs, because I very much agree with David that we need to pursue the decent work agenda. Just in relation to what Jack was saying, you know, about
very briefly, just in relation
to ETUC, I think that it is hugely important, because we have cause for hope. We see shoots of recovery here in Europe, but unless we get real investment, unless we have a policy for stimulus and growth, and I believe that the way that we can do that is by determining the future direction of the new and the incoming European Commission, and I believe that can be best done by having somebody such as Martin Schulz as President of the Commission, and we can progress.
One more thought,
that
and then
agenda.
we're going to wind this whole debate up.
People don't really, they focus on who's the President, but let's face it, people want jobs, they want their children to live in Ireland. We are making progress. These European elections will see that debate intensify, and the EPP, Jack, will not be found wanting. They are a great supporter of Ireland. They're coming to Ireland in March, and perhaps we can engage when they're in Ireland in March. Let's not look down, let's look up. People need hope, and let's not dash it by constantly looking for the flaw. There are many flaws in this House, my God, it's full of it, but there's people here like Emer and I who work for our constituents.
Lavinia, any final thoughts coming in there?
Yes, I'm afraid I'll have to end on a negative. Pauline says, unbelievable how many people spoke over the last few years, telling their stories of hardship, of having to water down their milks to make it last. The list is endless. Did the Troika care? Worse than that, our government didn't care. Shameful.
Well, you see,
we have 20 seconds
that is
now
not true at all, and I'm sorry that she feels that way, but I can understand it. This government that I'm in cares. This Parliament cares. It's about people, and the European elections will be about believing in people, giving them hope, and rising people who have just emailed in sadness above that. That's our job, and I make that commitment.
Emer Costello, also 20 seconds to wind things up.
I think that does reflect a lot of the feeling, and about the fact that there is people felt that there has been no democratic accountability of the Troika, that the social impact of the budget and fiscal consolidation, the social impact of austerity wasn't taken into consideration, and that's why I think that we need to return to the idea of the European social model, and we need to have a strong social dimension to EMU.
That's all we have time for, I'm afraid. Many thanks to everyone who's participated in this hangout. Here in the studio, Emer Costello and Mairead McGuinness, thank you very much indeed. On the line from Ireland, Gavin Duffy, Jack O'Connor and David Gibney, thank you all very much indeed. And on the line from Paris, Ramesh Gussi, and from my colleague here, Lavinia Hoyos, and me, Paul Anderson, many thanks indeed for joining us, and until next time.